Earlier this year, the nation was thrown into a deep shock after it was uncovered that a man known as Paul Mackenzie had been running a starvation death cult in Shakahola, Kilifi County for 20 years. The rescue operation began with the exhumation of at least 100 bodies, and as of today, the number stands at 428. But you may be surprised to learn that this is not the first time suspicions of a cult have been uncovered in the country. Some 12 years ago, a church known as the Finger of God found itself in the spotlight because it was suspected to be a cult. In this 3-part series, we revisit what came to be famously known as the Finger of God Saga and the key players behind it. With that being said, welcome to the Raw Pod with me, Renee Were. Let's get real and raw. The story of the Finger of God cannot be told without mentioning the name Esther Arunga. If you ask me, she's the main reason why we got to know about the church, because she was one of the biggest public figures associated with the church at the time. Before Betty Chalo, we had Esther Arunga.
She was this big media personality standing on screen.
It took me a whole week before I gathered courage to go and speak to Esther Arunga. Because in my head, she was a little goddess.
Correct.
Everyone was a huge fan of Esther Arunga, darling of the nation. She could do no wrong.
If you owned a TV in the late 2000s, you definitely saw her on your screens. Born to Dr. Robert Arunga and Petroline Arunga, she is a barrister with a twin brother and 6 other siblings. Her parents are high-standing members of the Kenyan Society, with her father currently chairing the Council of the Technical University of Mombasa. He also previously chaired ODM's National Elections Board. The entire family was raised as Seventh-day Adventists. Now, there are 3 things I want you to take note of, as they will be very important for later. First, her SDA background. Second, the fact that her parents were high status. And finally, her father having close ties with ODM. After her primary education, she joined the Kenya High School. Later, she enrolled at the University of Wollongong in New South Wales, earning a bachelor's degree in communication and law. After graduating, she returned to Kenya for a year, pursued a degree at the Kenya School of Law, and was admitted to the bar in 2009 in Nairobi. Esther got her start in journalism, working at Capital FM before eventually moving to KTN as a news anchor. It is at KTN where her media career flourished, and she quickly became a household name because of the skill with which she read the 9 p.m. news. This saw her win the 2008 Chaguo Latinis, also known as Chat Award, for the best teen TV anchor/presenter. Now, back in the day, the Chat Awards were one of the biggest, if not the biggest, entertainment awards that we had. And you may also be surprised to learn that the Chat Awards were conceived by the same founders who founded the Insider magazine. And back in the day, the Insider magazine was bigger than Pulse itself. Yeah, now you know. Things were going well for Arunga. She was a famous and beloved TV queen, a role model to many, and was even in a relationship with Wilson Malaba, an events organizer. According to Malaba, the two met at a social forum known as Cinema, which stands for Christians in Entertainment and Media. The forum brought together Christians in showbiz. In a past interview with the Daily Nation, Malaba narrates that he and Esther actually met in 2009, but at the time, she was engaged to someone else, a pilot. But the two only began dating after Esther broke off the engagement with the pilot in October that same year. This is where the infamous Finger of God church comes in. At the time of their meeting, Esther was already a member of the church. In the same interview, Wilson recalls that the former anchor was the one who convinced him to join the church in May 2009. Although he was inactive, he was already an ordained pastor at the Redeemed Gospel Church. So, with an invitation from Joseph Hellon, who we'll get on to later, to join the church leadership, he thought, why not? Little did Wilson know that this was the church where his relationship would eventually go to die. To know about the beginnings of Finger of God, we must first know the man behind it all, Joseph Hellon. Hellon, whose full name is Nimrod Joseph Onyango Omondi Hellon, is a Kenyan jazz musician, founder and head of the Finger of God Church, and co-founder of the Placenta Party, which we definitely have to mention. Hellon is mainly known for playing the saxophone. You might also remember him featuring on the popular reality singing contest Tusker Project Fame, aka TPF, as one of the faculty members. Personally, that's where I first got to know him. TPF, the good old days. Can we get them back? Hellon is pretty famous in Kenyan music circles and has actually been teaching music since his student days at Starehe Boys, which, if you really think about it, is quite an achievement because music is one of the hardest things to learn. Truth be told, music is not only just about singing. Learning the components and elements of music, composition, and whatnot is actually not the easiest thing. And I'm speaking from experience, from the little music lessons I took back in primary school. Yeah, music is one of the most difficult subjects out there. Unless you have that kind of, talent and ear for music, it's quite a struggle. And yet, here he was teaching music while still a student at a professional level. That's really impressive. Anyway, besides music, Hellon also loves to minister and describes himself as a spiritual person with close ties to the church. It was this love for spirituality that pushed him to start the Finger of God Church back in the early 2000s. So why the name Finger of God? Kenyans were very skeptical about the name when this church came into the spotlight. To many, the name sounded strange and perverse for something that was supposed to represent a religious institution. But Hellon himself explained the name's meaning, claiming that he drew inspiration from the Bible and that the public simply misunderstood the name. In an interview on Bonga na Jalas, Hellon gives more context to the church's name.
But that simply means they didn't know the Bible, because the Holy Spirit himself is called the Finger of God. It's written that way in the Bible.
So by now you know me and you know that I love to dig. And as usual, I did a little digging and I came across this interesting article by a publication known as the Weekly Citizen. Weekly Citizen used to be a very messy political newspaper back in the day. In the article, a woman who claimed to be a former member of Finger of God Church gave a rather disturbing reason behind the church's name. Let me read you a paragraph from the article. But before I do, huge disclaimer. What I am about to read is all alleged. This is all alleged. So please, disclaimer. Whatever you hear is all alleged. Tafadhali tuelewane, please and thank you. And I quote, according to a woman who has been in the church and who has since left after realizing that she was headed the direction that is the exact opposite of what she had been made to believe was towards a more rewarding life, for one to be accepted in the church that she says is actually a sect, one has to insert his finger in the private parts of a woman in a bizarre act that in all descriptions and purposes is a pornographic initiation rite. End of quote. Yikes. Anyway, moving on. In the same interview with Jalango, Hellon claims that the church was registered in 2007 after serious vetting by the Criminal Investigations Department, which it was known as at the time, over the course of 5 years. In the same interview, he says the reason for the investigations was suspicions over the kind of business he was involved in.
5 arms of the CIDs were investigating a serious crimes unit, special crimes unit, logistics department, NIS, and flying squad.
What?
Yeah. Because there was wind somewhere that we were dealing in, maybe money laundering. By the end of it all, they said, you are an innocent man.
But that was only the beginning of the many troubles the church would face.
So I reported to work for my new shift on a Tuesday, and the editor then, Mutuma Matthew, called me into his office and told me there's a story that I want you to pursue. I was early days in my career, but I had begun to catch the attention of my editors for my ability to write news features. So he told me, do you know Esther Arunga? Everyone knew Esther Arunga.
Yeah.
Then he told me, we have been told by a senior editor in the company at the time that Esther has left her family. She's not working anymore for like 2 weeks, and she's living with someone called Helen. Do you know someone called Helen? I had watched Tusker Project Fame and seen Joseph Helen on it. I knew him as a saxophonist and all that. And so what we want you to do is to work with the entertainment journalists, but we want you to do that story for news, because entertainment journalists do stories for the entertainment pages. So I got a driver, I was assigned a photographer, and we got together with the entertainment journalist and drove to Runda, because the journalist knew where Helen's house was in Runda. So we drove to Runda, you were talking along the way, got to a gate, I can't even remember. I can't take you there right now. But we got to a gate and asked a watchman. The guy asked, the journalist asked a watchman. The watchman, so is Helen around? He said, yes, he's around. Tell him so-and-so is here and we want to see him. But we waited for some time, and the watchman came back and said, he is not ready to see you, or he is not around. He gave an excuse. One of those things you could tell is a lie, because when we spoke, he went to ask him whether he's around, whether we can drive in.
The voice you just heard is that of John Girashu, a former reporter with the Daily Nation. John was actually the first reporter to break the story surrounding Esther Arunga, and from there, the madness slowly unraveled. At this point, Esther had, for 2 weeks, resigned from KTN and was said to be living with Helen at his home in Runda. But that was not all. She was also said to be a member of a church known as the Finger of God.
The journalists also knew where the church used to fellowship, which was a compound on Lenana Road, near DOD. There's a compound there that if you go there, it's trees opposite the Russian embassy. I think it was called Lenana Conference Center. So we went there. We drove from Runda out through town and up Lenana Road, drove into the compound. It's a conference center, and we went to the reception and asked, so we are looking for our friend, and we are told our friend goes to a church that usually meets here on Sundays. And the woman who was there told us, are you members of that church? No, we are not, but we are looking for a friend. We can't find her. We had realized by that time that we have to use subterfuge to get the story, which is allowed in journalism. And the woman, it turned out, had a whole story and had her own concerns as a mother that she was looking to express to people.
Who was the woman? Was she a worker at the center?
I think the woman, she was either a proprietor or connected to the ownership or connected to the management. So he told us that church is called Finger of God. I've never had such a church, but they come here and they have membership, and they are very not like the normal mainstream churches.
According to the lady John and his team spoke to, the church was unlike any she had seen because of the kind of members it had.
That church, I'll say, it has a lot of celebs and that kind of. She had that kind of excitement about the membership of the people who were meeting there. Her overall view was that the people who have been meeting there, doing church-like activities, have been involved. That church is not very church-like.
It's secular.
It's the way they dress, the kind of people that you see on TV, who, celebrity like you see there. You can have a church in your neighborhood and they play the keyboard, they beat the drum and they sing, and you hear them singing songs that you might know. So they were not that kind of church for her, and that was a bit of a concern for her. And even the way they dress and the kind of people who go there. So it seemed to her like a gathering of celebrities or well-known young people, and they're not involved in traditional Christian behavior.
Even with the information he had, John was still not satisfied because he didn't get what he really wanted to know, which was Esther Arunga's whereabouts and her side of things. Luckily, though, his senior editor at the time gave him a contact that helped provide perspective to the story.
When we got back to the newsroom, I told my editors at the time, we couldn't access the compound, but we've met this woman and she's given us an interesting story about the Finger of God Church and their activities. But, we didn't get her. She wasn't on the record. And we still don't know where Esther is. Esther, I think, the writer had tried to call her. I think she had picked, but then she stopped picking, and eventually the call stopped going through.
The senior editor or?
The writer, the entertainment writer. Okay. I don't want to name him, he's my friend. Okay. So that was our frustration. So actually when we got to the newsroom, we kind of split. He went back to his desk. I went to brief the editors. The editors at that point, these are senior editors. They are middle-aged men. They told me, okay, then I think we'll continue chasing the story. But then the one who had been concerned about the family told me, I'm also in touch with the boyfriend. Let me call him. So he called the boyfriend. And the boyfriend said, okay, we can meet at Kengele's on Koinange Street.
And just to clarify, the boyfriend at this time was not Quincy Timberlake.
No. It was a gentleman called Maloba.
Remember when I said that the Finger of God Church was where Malaba's relationship with Esther Arunga would go to die? Well, at the time John was meeting up with him, a distraught Wilson Malaba revealed that his relationship with Esther was on the rocks.
So we met at the bar up there. It was the balcony area, so it was a bit airy, so we sat there. And so Maloba, I think Arunga's brother came, I'm not sure. But our conversation was mainly with Maloba. And he told us we were dating, we were very okay, and then Esther started behaving weirdly. I think they were even engaged, I think. And I'm very worried about the direction she has taken, and I don't know what to do. Is it the brother who then came? I think a relative came and told us the same thing. She's gone, and we're asking, so why did she break up with you formally? No, she kind of drifted, and the lost warmth of the relationship and all that. And by that time I felt I have enough of a story. I can go. I have confirmation from boyfriend. Yeah. We've tried, we've gone through the whole journey. It's getting late. People will be late to press. But whenever I tried to leave, he'll ask me, so what are you going to write? What are you going to write? Journalists, you don't know what they're going to write. They can't write and show you this, what I've written. So we had quite a push and pull over that, and he called the senior editor and told him, I'm concerned about the story your guy is going to write. I don't know. And the guy gave him assurances, we'll do a safe story. We'll be fine. You'll be fine. We won't embarrass you and all that. So I then went back to the newsroom. By that time, it was quite late in the day now. And my editor then, so I found Mutuma had already gone home. So the editor I found now watching over the paper before it goes to press, told me to call the news editor at the time. So I called the news editor, Eric Shimoli. So I called Shimoli, and Shimoli told me, he basically told me not to put any names. So I can't name the person. You know, there's fear of defamation.
Yeah.
And I haven't spoken to the person I'm saying has left home and is not going to work. So I can't name the celebrity, the news person. I can't name the boyfriend. I can't name the Helen, who she has gone away with, and I can't name the boyfriend. And I can't name the person from the family. So I was asking myself, why am I even doing this story then? And I remember the intro I wrote is that a well-known television journalist has abandoned her family and is reported to be living with a jazz musician. I think someone later wrote maestro, because I remember there was a debate the day after over who is a maestro and who is not. How does someone become a maestro? So that's what I wrote. A well-known television journalist has abandoned the family and is now reported to be living with a popular jazz musician. Helen was popular because he had been on TV.
Yeah.
And the story then went for a few paragraphs. It was a filler. You know how a newspaper page looks like. You have a main story, you have a photograph, then you have a short story on the side that in the newspaper design at the time is mostly used like to fill that space. The main story your eyes will fall on will be the main one. So it was a filler. And it was on page 31. Those are the days when the paper had 72 pages. You know, it was big. So a story on page 31 was really hidden inside the pages, somewhere near the business pages. And so I wrote the story. I felt like my day had not been spent usefully, and I went home.
And that is how Kenyans were first introduced to the Finger of God. Despite this introduction being very low-key because of the way the story was handled, it caused quite a buzz in the NMG newsrooms. People were divided on the direction the story should have taken. While some thought that John played it too safe by not naming names, others dismissed it as mindless gossip.
But then when I got to the office the following morning, I used to go in through the second floor. My pass was not activated for the third floor. So I'll go in through the second floor and go up to the third floor where the editorial floor was. And I had friends, one or two friends on the second floor. So when I was passing, one of them called me, Crash. So I went. And she asked me excitedly, who is that TV person that has been written in the paper? Because they'll know a newspaper person working on the DA and the Daily Nation knows about the stuff that you haven't, the names you haven't put in the paper. So, and I told her, I haven't looked at the paper. I don't know. Because I didn't want to start. And I was stunned that someone had read that story that early in the morning and was now curious about its subject. So, and I went up and now found there was a bit of a buzz going on, and people are saying, hey, Crash, you know your story. People are saying that you should have written the name of the person. I know we are playing too safe. And then it sparked a debate. Those days there will be a debate on the email internally. Why was this person called a maestro? Why are we sleeping on this story? Why are we not naming names? It's a very cowardly done story. So yeah, I was a bit of a rookie, and so I was wondering, why don't you guys ask the editors those questions? But my name was not on the byline. It was by Nation Reporter. So I could deny that I ever did such a story. But now the following day we were told that you now need to get very active on this story. It's an important story. It's a big story, and it now created a furor. But then there were opposing voices, because this story now has been published on a Wednesday. Now we wanted to do a full-fledged feature for page 3, which was the news feature page, the prime news feature page on the Daily Nation at the time. But the debate went on. We started being told, some senior editors of the opinion, this is a salacious story, gossip story. This is a serious newspaper. We cannot put such a story in the newspaper. So it sparked a whole debate. There's, there are senior editors who don't want you to do it. There are some who want you to do it. There are colleagues who want you to do it. So when that kind of situation arose, there was sort of a stalemate on whether the story should be done anyway or what kind of thing. But then now, on the following day, or now, is it Thursday, the Star ran the story on their page 1. It was their headline story. Headline of the second, it was on the front page. It had a picture of Esther in her graduation gown hugging her mother, and it had now full details written by their top entertainment writer.
My name is Grace Kerongo. I'm currently the web production editor for Nairobi News. Funny enough, the Esther Arunga Helen Finger of God story was not assigned to me. It just happened. At the time, I was a columnist for the Star newspaper. It's owned by Radio Africa Group. So at the time, since I had a column that was running daily and the paper was running 6 days a week, I had to get content every day for 6 days. Let me paint a picture of the major players in this story. There is Helen. At the time, Helen had just done Tusker Project Fame. Yeah. You remember? Yeah. So he was popping. Like, he had even evening events for where he'd play saxophone and people would pay and go to the club and see him. And around the same time, he started a church called Finger of God. It wasn't as big because people knew him more because of playing the saxophone and being a teacher for music, and he also had a music school. So that was Helen at that time. Because of Tusker Project Fame, he attracted a lot of celebrities to go for those events. So of course, I was covering the entertainment bit, so I went to some of those events. When I went to some of those events, I met a lot of celebrities who went there. And then at the time also, Esther Arunga was part of those events.
According to Grace, her first encounter with the Finger of God situation was through a court case involving Helen and Esther's ex-fiancé, Wilson Malaba.
As part of just me filing my stories, you'll get maybe someone has gone to court, a reporter has gone to court, and they find an entertainment story based off of the characters who are in that story, in that court case, are entertainment personalities. So who was in this story? It's Helen and Esther Arunga's fiancé. So of course the news people are like, Grace, this is a story more of your beat. Take it and use it in your column. So I put it. It was on. I got the story on a Friday. That's when the case was filed, and then so I used it on Monday because we didn't have a weekend paper. Okay. So Monday, the story runs, and it didn't have as big an impact. And I don't remember the details very well, but I know Helen was being sued by Esther Arunga's fiancé over some defamation, stuff like that. The story ran, that's Monday. On Tuesday, my source came to me and said, Grace, you see that story you ran? There's something even more deeper happening with Helen and a guy called Quincy. I'm like, who's Quincy?
So, about Quincy, that's a question that will be answered in the second part of this series. Be sure to tune in. After Grace published the Wilson versus Helen case that didn't quite become a hit story, one of her sources, a former Finger of God member, presented her with exclusive emails that helped give Grace more insight into what was happening. Now, because I don't believe in spoilers, the details in these emails will also be revealed in part 2.
So when I got those emails, I went to the editor, I was like, where? You see that court case? This is the drama. Then, of course, at the time, I'd written a story for my column. So when the editor saw it, she was like, at the time the editor was Catherine Gisheru, she was like, no, this is a big story. Write it, put it in the front page. So the story went. It hit headlines. By 2 o'clock, Esther Arunga and Helen called a press conference. So of course, because the story was mine, I was told to go to cover it. And then there was TV, there's radio, there's everyone, like it just blew up. So everyone at the press conference is asking, where is Quincy? Because everyone knows Helen, everyone knows Esther.
But he was not present.
He didn't come. So everyone's like, where is Quincy? We want to know where Quincy is so that we can ask him questions. He didn't show up. And then, of course, that's when they launched their presidential campaign.
It was after this press conference that the whole situation turned into a media storm. And since Helen had announced his interest in the presidency come 2013 with Esther as his running mate, it evolved into a matter of national interest. That meant that the intelligence units were now on their case because, after all, they were aiming for the highest seats in the country. It also didn't help that they belonged to a strange society known as the Finger of God Church. All this led to police raiding Mr. Helen's house at 2 a.m. on a Sunday in early 2010 and arresting him, Esther, Quincy, and other followers of the church over their involvement in a religious organization with a suspicious background. After a series of court cases and police investigations into the church, the trio was out of trouble, but that was not the last time we would hear from them. With that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for part 2 where we go deep and explore more about Quincy Timberlake, and let's get real and raw right here on the Raw Pod with me, Renee Were.